Ba 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 ra ba ba ra ba 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 ba. Ba 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 ra ba ba ra ba 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 ba. Salutations and welcome, friends, to another episode of Amalfi Sports. In this episode, we're taking a break from handicapping horse races and breaking down the latest sporting events to bring you an interview. This is going to be a new feature in Amalfi Sports where we interview members in horse racing and across the world of sports about their experiences and knowledge. Remember that the best way to get all of this great content on Amalfi Sports is to go to our website or YouTube feed, and you can find links to both of those below. Today, I am thrilled to be joined by Josh Rodriguez, who is one member of the handicapping collective On the Wrong Lead, presented by Stable Duel. Josh lives in Illinois, and his home track is Arlington Park, which sadly just saw the final, what we believe to at least be final, Arlington Million run this past weekend. For On the Wrong Lead, Josh primarily focuses on Midwestern tracks, but handicaps races from coast to coast every week. I had a great conversation with Josh about how he got involved in the sport and the tips he's learned along the way. Sit back and enjoy my conversation with him, and I think you'll learn a thing or two the next time you're wagering at the track. Josh, thanks so much for coming on the podcast and talking little horse racing and handicapping with me and sharing your knowledge on these topics with our listeners. So I wanted to start with the beginning. When did you first get interested in horse racing, and what was it that drew you to the sport?
So it's funny because, a lot of people always have these stories about, going to the track when they're younger. Their parents used to take them and things like that. Mine is definitely much more degenerate. So I had a friend who I used to work with at my last job. I still keep in contact with him, and, we still talk races all the time. But he's like, hey, I know you like to gamble, because I go to Vegas like 3 times a year. So he's like, you should get in this derby pool with us. And so I was like, oh, yeah, sure. So it was like he had like 15 people at work. They would all toss in $100, and he would try and hit the superfecta at the derby with it. And so, I gave him $100, and then I was just like, well, I guess I should probably like actually look at this and follow it so I can, kind of see what it is. And, the derby, even growing up, everybody, just watches it. It just happens. So I'd seen probably about 5 or 6 derbies, growing up, but on TV. But I'm like, all right, well, let's take a look. Let's start looking at this. So that Friday, Oaks Day, I decided to deposit like $100 into my TVG account. They have like a sign up bonus or whatever. And my brother is kind of into horse racing, so he was actually at Arlington, and so he was texting me picks, and so I was playing them, and so I ended up being up like $50 on the day, and I was like, oh, this is so easy. If my brother can figure this out, like this is a piece of cake. And then Derby Day, of course, the worst thing happens, and like I think I hit the trifecta for like. Wow. I don't know. I think I hit it for like $1. So I think it didn't pay much, but I think it paid like $200 or something. It was the year Justify one. Yeah. And so I was like, oh man, like this is a piece of cake. So it's really the gambling side that got into me. I ended up having just a huge stroke of beginner's luck. I was up like $800 or $900 in like the first month I ever started, doing horse racing, and I quickly gave it all back after that. But yeah, it really was just the gambling aspect is one of it, but the puzzle aspect too, right? Trying to figure out handicapping, and constructing wagers really is the main draw to horse racing for me.
Yeah. So you mentioned the gambling obviously being something that was attractive. When was it that it went from, okay, this is kind of interesting, I'll throw a couple bucks in here, a couple bucks there? And when did it go from kind of a passing fancy perhaps to something that you really wanted to devote a lot more time to in terms of handicapping and looking at tracks across the country and kind of, putting together these bets? Was that a gradual process, or was it something you were just hooked immediately?
So it was funny. I was hooked immediately, and I just kept playing. And I was playing like every day, and I just kept winning. Like, it wasn't a lot of money, but right. When you start with $100 and you run it up to like $900, $1,000 or whatever, I was just like, oh, like this is a piece of cake. And then like I immediately just like started losing it all, like everybody does, right? Like beginner's luck runs out at some point, and I still had no clue what I was doing. Like, I can't even tell you right now how I lost all the money, because it was just like, I was just like doing whatever.
Right.
And so at some point, I used to track my results,
Mm-hmm.
like to see like how I would do. And at some point, I saw this graph that went really high and then just dropped all the way down to the point where one of my co-hosts, Chase, the Wolf of Oak Lawn,
Yeah.
he was like, "Oh, no, looks like you're gonna have to put another little dip there into your graph." And I got like really mad, and I just like got frustrated. I didn't want to talk to him, and right around that point, I was kind of like, like I got to figure out what the heck I started doing wrong.
Yeah.
And so like I started talking with more people, and just try to learn and kind of build off that, because like I essentially had probably about $1,000 in free bankroll to
Mm-hmm.
to start learning with.
Mm-hmm.
With things like poker, they always say the hardest part is like it takes a ton of time, ton of hands, ton of playing, and you're gonna lose.
Yep.
So I was lucky enough that I kind of got like a boost and like I had a little bit of free money to do a little bit of that learning.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's after kind of losing that initial bankroll, probably about like 6 months in, I was like, yeah, I really need to, sit down and start, hunkering down and learning this.
Yeah. So, a lot of people go to the tracks on the weekends. It might be a family outing. It might just be something casual, bachelor party or bachelorette party. People are in town, want to have some fun. They go out to the track. They might get a racing form, probably are pretty overwhelmed by it if they've not looked at a racing form in recent years or, in recent memory. And so I was curious if you have some kind of go-to handicapping philosophies that kind of the casual fan can take with them when they go to the track on a big weekend, like for the Whitney or the Travers or something like that, that, they can kind of block out some of the noise and focus on just a couple of statistics.
Yeah, so I think the biggest thing, and this is something I still do, like the biggest hurdle that people need to kind of get over when starting out is limiting the amount of bets that they're doing. So for somebody brand new who's just like starting out, I mean, I wouldn't do anything but a win bet.
Mm.
I know everybody always talks about oh, hey, if you do show bets, you keep your bankroll going longer or whatever. Like, you want to win money, right? You want the new person to go in and win a little bit of money, right? So I would say you focus on win bets, and you only pick one horse to win. Um, Now, when it comes to like actually like looking at the form and things like that, like you always have stuff like, I mean, if you're actually at the track, I think one of the best things you can do, and like especially for like a new player, like without diving into the form, I mean, just go to the paddock,
Hmm.
look at the horses, which horse looks good, and like you like, hey, that horse has got a shiny coat, bet it, right?
Yeah.
I mean, honestly, I think that you'll probably have better luck doing that if you've never ever like read a form than anything else, because looking at the horse is an important thing. Like if the horse is sitting there is all worked up, that's a negative trait.
Yeah.
So I think if you're brand new, just go down, go to the paddock, look at all the horses, find the one that looks the best, and put some win money on it.
Yeah.
If you're going with a group and you have somebody who knows a little bit of what they're doing, I think that then you can do something like a show parlay, right?
Mhm.
Uh, Everyone chip in $20, right? You got 4 or 5 people. You start with $100, and just see if you can win, if you can show 5, 6, 7, 8 times in a row. I mean, you're gonna run that up. As actually also a tip, if you go to Vegas, I forgot who I heard this from. It might have been the Racing Dudes. It was a different
Okay.
podcast, but do that, and they're just going to start tossing drink tickets to you. So
There you go.
do that in Vegas. Yeah, that's a good way. But I think that's the best way for somebody who's got zero experience
Yeah.
to kind of get involved first time to go to the track.
Yeah, that's a great point about just going to the paddock and watching the horses. And there's a thin line between a horse that is keyed up and ready to go and a horse that you just look at and you go, this horse is crazy, and like this horse is not gonna, it's just lathered and is just acting up and it's just way too anxious. But you're right. I mean, and there are weeks where I'll be looking at picks and I'll feel pretty good about my selections, and all of a sudden I'll see the horse come out on the track for the post parade, and I'm like, oh, And I can just tell, like, okay, this is not going to be this horse's day, and you just never know. So that is great advice, I think. And I think everybody has a story too of like their dad or grandfather taking them to the track and being like, bet the gray ones, or something like that,
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, and it's like, I don't really use much physical handicapping in my day to day now. I know occasionally, like if Maggie says something, like if I'm watching Naira, maybe I'll pay attention to it. But
mm-hmm.
I mean, for the most part, I'm very much a form
Yeah,
person. But it's just tough. Like you don't want to go like you could go out there and you can pick names and have a good time,
true.
but if you actually like want to be like, hey, like slightly educated, I just think that just looking at the horse, because oftentimes, right, you might go and like you'll see a horse and you're like, oh man, this horse is like it's huge, like this horse looks real healthy. You look and he's like the 5-2 favorite, 2-1 favorite, and it's like, makes sense, right?
Yeah.
But and like at the same time, you don't want to tell somebody to just go and bet the favorite all the time. I think that's just lazy.
Yeah.
I will tell you that my wife, last time we went to Arlington, probably about 3 weeks ago, and she was just picking names, and her and I landed on the same horse, and I actually like looked at the form, and she just picked it by name, and it was like a 39-1 shot at Arlington that won.
Oh, wow.
And so she put $5 to win on it and got back 200. And she's like, "You can win this much money playing horses?" I was like, "Yeah." And then like I felt sheepish because I'd only put $4 to win on it, and I had keyed it in like exactas and stuff.
Right.
So I was like, "Man, my wife just hit a long shot and made more money than I did, and I had the same horse." Like,
I love it. That's great. Well, hey, like you said, beginner's luck and that sort of thing. So that's great. So I wanted to ask, you're part of On the Wrong Lead by Stable Duel, and I was curious when this collective, if you will, kind of came together, this group of guys, and how long have you been doing it, and what's it like to collaborate with 4 other guys on this project?
yeah, I mean, I want to say it was probably about 2 years ago. It might be a little bit longer, but we all kind of met on Discord, which is kind of is a chat app if people aren't like super tech savvy. Really heavily used by video game
Mm.
people. Also nowadays, pretty much if you go like on Reddit, every subreddit usually has a Discord channel or server at this point now. But we'd all met up on the horse racing Discord, and so a couple of us just like we're talking all the time, and so we had a private chat going, and we would just talk about various things. And at some point, we were just kind of like, it seems like there's a real lack of like beginner content out there, and so our real big focus was like, hey, like people always ask like, hey, where do you start?
Hmm.
What books should you read? What should you do? And it's like all the popular books at this point are 20, 30 years old, and not that they're still not relevant, but you probably get less out of them now than you would have when they first came out. So we kind of wanted to go and I'm going to say reinvent, kind of teaching somebody how to play the horses, how to handicap and stuff like that. So we started doing some beginner videos, and then at some point we're like, we should, like, no one's really doing a lot of streaming stuff, and of course, like, I think everyone had the same idea around the same time, because now like everybody streams, and everybody and the pandemic I'm sure helped with a lot of that stuff.
Yeah.
But so we just started doing live streams on YouTube, and yeah, so it originally was just me, Caleb, Chase, and Mark, and then a couple months ago, our friend Brian, like he's always kind of like just been there talking, and he would always give ideas and pitch stuff and be like, hey, and like he was kind of doing stuff on his own, and at some point I was like, dude, like just come with us, and all 5 of us can start doing this stuff. So, so that's how we kind of ended up at 5, and then yeah, a couple of maybe it's about 2 months ago, we kind of hooked up with Stable Duel and started doing some more Stable Duel focused stuff, and are starting to kind of do a little bit of beginner content for them as well. I know Caleb's a real avid Stable Duel player,
Hmm.
so I know he's kind of been working on some stuff, and we've just been doing our streams and podcasts and things like that since.
Yeah. No, it's great. It is interesting. I think during the pandemic, I felt like horse racing was one of the sports that actually really benefited from the pandemic in a lot of ways because it kept running. Everything else seemed to be getting canceled. And every day I could turn on FS1 or FS2 and watch Saratoga or Belmont or Churchill or, and then TVG with Delmar and the West Coast. And so it was, while the rest of the sports leagues were in hiatus, horse racing just kept going on, and it was a great way to entertain. And so you're right, there are a lot of new players, and you're right, not a lot of new content all the time, or content for those new players. So that's great. I love what you guys are doing. And so I wanted to shift a little bit and talk about kind of the current state of horse racing. I mentioned that it's picked up some popularity. Actually, we've actually seen record numbers in terms of what's being wagered at the track. Saratoga, I think 2 weeks ago, had like a 19% increase in money wagered over 2 years ago. It's healthy in one standpoint, but we've also seen controversy with Bob Baffert's suspension, and we've also seen the no whip rule come under a spotlight during the Haskell Stakes. And so I was just curious, kind of what were your thoughts on maybe the state of the sport and how it might attract more fans, or kind of how it could spread its appeal?
Now, I want to preface all this, right, as as I'm strictly a bettor, right?
Mm-hmm.
So like it's always tough, right? Like with horse racing, right? You have your owners, you have the tracks, you have the trainers, you have the jockeys, you have the horses themselves, you got the people betting on it, right? Then you got all the people on the backstretch, you got all the people who do the rehab. So like the industry is huge, right? And one of the big problems is that every single person in all of those areas wants something different. And it makes it tough, right? You see something like, I mean, luckily we get something like Bob Baffert, right? I think everyone can agree that like drugging horses is bad. I mean, I don't think you can ask anybody who's in the industry like whether or not that's a good thing. Well, with the exception of maybe some shady trainers
Right.
there here and there,
Yeah.
right? And maybe owners that are complicit. I don't know. I don't want to start assuming anything, but like with the exception of that, right? You start getting stuff like I already forgot the law that got enacted, but the Horse Racing Integrity Act, I think it's called, right?
Yeah.
Where they're talking about, hey, maybe we need to start doing like a centralized body and this kind of stuff. And it's just like, to me, as a bettor from the outside, that sounds like a great idea. But you have to go through all these other groups and see what they think, right? So, I mean, honestly, I think that that's probably the number one thing. I think that would help a lot of stuff. That would help standardize a lot of stuff across the board. If there's one thing I can tell, especially for new people, it's like it's really important to focus on one circuit or one track to start. Maybe two. Maybe if if you want to, you want to play something later and something earlier, like okay, maybe two. Maybe you play like California, New York, or something like that. But it's really important because all of a sudden you start realizing the rules are different everywhere, right? The whip rules in California are different than the whip rules in Kentucky, which are different than the whip rules in New Jersey, which are different than New York. And like, it's really easy if you're a new person, right? Like if you were watching a horse, like a jockey out in California, you'd be like, why did my jockey stop trying? Like he stopped urging the horse. He stopped doing anything. And it's like, no, he gave the 3 taps he's allowed to give, and that was it. And whereas if you watch New York, and you see some bug jock out there, I mean, he's really hustling. He's really trying to get his horse going. So I mean, I really think that just like the standardization of everything would help, because it is confusing. The other day there was some rule. It might have been at Sam Houston. A couple of races got washed off, in a pick 5, and there was a carryover. Apparently, there's a rule for Sam Houston's track that if that happens, the carryover goes to the next day, and it's just like I've literally never heard that. Like nobody has. And it was just like some weird, like, hey, this is a Sam Houston only thing. But like that's just ridiculous. Like if you watch the carryover at any other place, like that's just not how it works. So I really think that standardizing things would help. Mind you, this is coming as a bettor. I'm sure if any horsemen see this, they're probably like, he's so wrong. The government's going to ruin everything. And, but That's me as a,
Yeah.
big old dumb better. That's what I think would help things a little bit here.
Well, but it's funny. I know nearly every single time Randy Moss is on TV on NBC, he says the same thing. I mean, he and Jerry Bailey kind of talk regularly about centralized body would be really great, trying to get these tracks to be coordinated with each other, and just so it's not just the bettors. I think there's support in other places, but you're right. I mean, there are a lot of different constituents and stakeholders in this industry, and you're right that they all do want something a little bit different. Yeah, I mean, I think we're all excited that we have a great summer ahead of us, a summer and fall ahead of us. And so, with that being said, I wanted to preface this by saying you and I are chatting on August 4th. And so, this probably won't be released for a couple of weeks. But I was wondering if you could, we have a lot of great non-Breeders' Cup races coming up between now and November. And I was wondering, what are a couple of races that you're particularly excited about or interested in between now and November in Del Mar?
Yeah, I don't know when this is going to be released, but I know like this weekend, for example, we do have the Whitney weekend, and the Whitney I'm not super interested in. I mean, it's 5 horses. I think it's going to be a good race, but I always like seeing bigger fields. I actually think the test is really interesting. That's going to be this weekend. It's going to be 8-horse field. You got a lot of horses cutting back. I think you might have a horse or two stretching out. So, that 7 furlong distance is always exciting, and you got some really good horses in there. Obviously, the Travers is always a really cool day at Saratoga. I'm actually going to be in Saratoga for Alabama,
Oh, cool.
which is the week before Travers. So that should be fun. And then, I mean, not to get too somber, but next Saturday, Arlington Millions, probably last running. I'll also be on track for that. So that's going to be an emotional day, I think, for a lot of people. Luckily, I think I'd probably be like super emotional if it had been like, I've been doing this since I grew up. I mean, I've been to Arlington maybe like 10 times.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, it sucks what's happening there.
Yeah.
But I always look forward to that day.
Yeah.
And then you start after that, you start getting into Churchill coming back and Keeneland coming back, which is kind of my focus, more the Midwest tracks.
Okay.
And then the props into the Breeders' Cup.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's a full season, and you're right. Like as soon as one of them falls off, the next ones start popping up, and so it's a lot of exciting stuff going on. So I wanted to kind of start wrapping things up by going over some kind of fun questions with you, and you just kind of give me your thoughts right off the top of your head, and you can explain your answers. You don't have to just kind of give me a one-word response, but. So let's start off. What's your favorite? I think I might know the answer to this, but what's your favorite racetrack?
Yeah, it's probably Arlington, just because it's right here. I mean, it's real close to me, and it's just a beautiful facility if you've never been. And unfortunately, I don't think a lot of people are ever going to go again since they're closing. But it's a shame what's happening there. Saratoga is beautiful. I'll tell you the best comparison, and this probably doesn't make sense to anybody who's not from Chicago, but like. Saratoga's Wrigley Field, right? And Comiskey Park, or whatever the heck it's called now. I don't know. I'm not a Sox fan, but is Arlington. And when they built that stadium, Comiskey, I mean, like it was just a modern, real nice, great food, all kinds of stuff.
Yeah.
I haven't been to a Sox game in years, so maybe it's different now. But it's probably the nicest modern track out there.
Yeah.
And that has to come from people who've been to other more modern tracks, but yeah.
I was actually at New Comiskey. I think the year it opened, I want to say. I was at a Sox game. I'll never forget it. Wilson Alvarez gave up 8 runs in the first inning and threw a no-hitter after that, the rest of the game.
Oh,
it was
goodness.
incredible. The Sox came back to win 9-8. But I like that combination. I like that comparison to Wrigley and Saratoga. So what racetrack that you've never been to do you want to visit most?
I probably would say Del Mar.
Mm-hmm.
I've never been, and I know there was the huge Del Mar Saratoga controversy on Twitter or conversation where just for like weeks people were just talking about that. But probably Del Mar, probably Santa Anita second. I've actually never been to California, so
okay.
that would probably be high on my list.
Yep. No, my dad went to law school at Pepperdine, and I've never heard one story about law school, but I've heard lots of stories about Del Mar and Santa Anita. So, so yeah, he loves it out there. Do you prefer dirt or turf racing?
I would say turf racing, and that's mostly just because of how exciting it is.
Mhm.
I'll tell you, if you ever watch any of our streams, like they like to make fun of me because like on dirt racing, it's like I'll just take the speed,
Yeah.
right? The horse that I'll get the horse that gets out in front, and then let them catch him.
Yeah.
And I feel like sometimes, especially with American dirt racing, it's just kind of what happens. But I feel like turf, like you get more interesting, you get a little bit more into the trip side of things. Pace is still very important, and I think is often overlooked in turf racing. Yeah, I would say turf racing.
All right. In terms of betting, I was going to say, like, do you prefer betting exotics like trifectas and superfectas, or do you like pick threes, pick fives, or do you like parlays, like what you were mentioning earlier? Do you have a preferred type of bet?
Yeah, I'll tell you. When I first started, everyone pretty much was like, "Oh, you're a vertical player, right? Like the exactas and trifectas and things like that." I've pretty much flipped and gone 180 and strictly play for the most part win, double, and pick three.
Mm-hmm.
I just like at some point someone like a long time ago was like, "Oh, it's easier to pick the winner than it is to figure out who's going to finish second." And I was like, that sounds ridiculous. And then like eventually, you realize you can start combining different things, right? Like if you really like this horse to win, you bet it to win, and then you figure out, hey, let's look at the next race. Maybe I like two, maybe I like three horses in the next race. Build a double with it, and you're just kind of getting more value on that one win candidate. So
Yeah.
I win and double is probably my highest handle, and then I'll occasionally dip into pick threes. I mean, I play pick fours and pick fives as well, but just to like the detriment of my bankroll. I don't know why I keep playing them, and I keep on looking on Twitter and like seeing
Oh yeah.
people like inside the pylons and other people, and they're like you need to stop doing this, and I'm like, this guy is right. Like I need to stop doing this. Like a coma patient. The next week, right there I am firing a pick five and getting mad when I'm out in the third leg.
Yeah, I hear you on that. Okay, so who is your favorite, or maybe from a handicapping standpoint, most reliable trainer?
So I'll have to show my I guess my hometown colors here, and I actually really like betting Larry Ravelli
Mm,
anywhere outside of Illinois.
okay.
And I just don't know if like people don't know who he is, or don't know like his horse. Like he hasn't. I think he had this horse called the Tabulator a couple of years ago that ran in the Breeders' Cup Juvenile, but like he doesn't really have a ton of like big name horses. He's more like in the claiming and like the allowance game and stuff like that. But every once in a while he'll get a really good horse and he'll ship it out to Gulfstream, or ship it to Canterbury, ship it to Churchill,
Mhm.
and put it on a turf or dirt or whatever, and it'll win, and like you'll get a much more fair price than you do here at Arlington, where he wins at like 30%. So I like to bet him outside of Illinois.
Ah, that's a great little tidbit. That's great. So let's go to the jockey side. Do you have a favorite or most reliable jock these days?
Look, I'm not going to say that this man is reliable. All right, this man is the opposite of reliable. But I'll tell you what, man. If I don't just like love / hate Joel Rosario,
Oh wow. Okay.
like, I mean, I don't know. Like he is just like the like if jockeys were a drug you took,
Hmm.
like that would be Joel Rosario, because the highs and the lows that you get from this man, it's just like a roller coaster of emotions. Like you just like sitting there, he's taking this horse like way too far back, and you're like, what are you doing? And then somehow he just weaves through like 8 people for just like no reason, just to show off that he can, I
Right.
guess, and then wins. And you're like, what is this guy doing? But I really think, I mean, he's super talented.
Yeah.
He's great. He might be the best like turf sprint jock in the country. You sometimes just get some mind just baffling rides, and I don't know. Like he has to know like the times that he just like nails the rides and is just like the greatest ride in the world. Like you have to imagine the man knows what he's doing.
Right.
So like I don't know. I try not to get too much into the Twitter like jockey
Yeah.
stuff. I keep that
Yeah.
private, and I swear I curse jockeys' names in my head,
Sure.
or maybe in our chat. But I try not to get too onto it in Twitter. But I'll tell you, man,
Yeah.
Rosario has just like caused me to like, I don't know, have like mini strokes or something more than anybody else. And I don't know. I just like what's the disease that you get when like you fall in love with your captor?
Oh, Stockholm syndrome. Yeah.
Yeah, I have Stockholm syndrome for Joel Rosario. I'm just like,
That's
I don't
great.
know, I can't quit him.
I love it. I love it. All right. So let's finish up by talking about horses. I know you're on the betting side, but in your opinion, who is the best 3-year-old horse in the country?
Ooh, that's a tough one.
It is.
I don't, you know, there's two that I kind of am going back and forth on, and they are two different horses. Um, One obviously is Essential Quality. I think Essential Quality is just he's probably the best distance horse that we have,
hmm
or best route horse that we have right now. But I'll tell you, man, last week what Jackie's Warrior did, I know it was a sprint. I mean, it was just super impressive, and I wanted to just like be 100% against that horse, and it was just insane.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I guess I'll say Jackie's Warrior.
Yeah.
I'll go with Jackie's
I
Warrior.
like it. I like it. And that was a monsoon that was taking place at Saratoga. I mean, that was just such slop, and put up a huge number. So
They just better not stretch him out.
yeah,
They just do not stretch him out. Just let him sprint.
Yep.
Because I think like after he was on the Derby trail, right?
Mhm.
I think everybody was just like, oh, this horse is just is nothing, and then they sprint him, and look, he's a monster.
Yep, he's and it's amazing how many times you'll watch you'll look at the PPs and or the racing forms, and you'll see a horse that's just crushing it at 6 furlongs, and all of a sudden they move him up to a mile, and it's just terrible. And it's like, who thought that was a good idea? Just stay crushing things at 6 furlongs. Why are we moving the horse up in distance? I mean, I understand there's some allure sometimes, but if a horse is successful at a certain distance, just stick with it. So do you have? So let's expand beyond the 3-year-olds. Who's in your opinion, the best active racehorse in the country?
Ooh, best active racehorse in the country, huh? I'm gonna go with Latruska
Yep.
as in the best active kind of in her area. I've always been a huge fan. I mean, maybe not the best. Maybe it's just my favorite right
Sure.
now. But I just love the way she runs. And I remember just speaking of jockeys, just being so mad at the ride Joel Rosario gave her and at Oaklawn one
Yeah.
time, and I was just like, I couldn't believe that the horse wasn't on the lead.
Yeah.
But I think I think right now is probably the best older female horse going, and I think she's got a really good shot at winning the distaff.
Yeah, I agree. No, she's a monster. And I remember somebody said one time, I think it was Bill Knack, who said about Secretariat, the only reason he ever lost was because he was handled by humans. And so, sometimes you see a horse like Latruska and you're like, how did this horse lose? Like, why? But yeah, that's great. So, well, listen, to all the listeners, you got to go and check out Josh on Twitter at the handle @CherryDrank, and also go to ontherwronglead.com to get his and the group's handicapping advice. But I do want to get you out of here on one last question. And I know the group also talks about bourbon. So before you leave, let the listeners know your favorite or best bourbon recommendation.
So this is tough, right? Because if there's one thing that the pandemic has done is just absolutely destroy any chance or semblance you had of getting any kind of, even talked about bourbon. Like I feel like I'm almost scared to say anything because, as soon as somebody says something and records it and is like, hey, this bourbon's good.
Yeah.
Like, people kind of just like go crazy. But for people who don't drink bourbon, because I'm going to say stuff that, I mean, everybody already knows.
Yeah.
Stuff that you can actually find on a shelf. I think two of the best things you can buy are Rare Breed by Wild Turkey, which is their barrel proof. I think that it's very consistent, very good. It's usually about $40-$50. And then another one that I really like is just the regular Four Roses single barrel. Same thing. I think it's in that same price, that $40-$50. I feel like that's a sweet spot. Don't let anyone convince you that you need to spend more money unless you just like feel like it.
Yeah.
But and Caleb and I talk about this all the time, is that there's this like weird chasm between like $50 and like $80 where there's just a bunch of bourbon, and like there's usually something better or just as good that's cheaper. So if you don't drink bourbon, like don't spend more than $50. You can try those two out. Or try any of the other expressions. The Four Roses small batch is good too. Wild Turkey 101. Those are cheap. I'm also a big Knob Creek guy.
Yeah.
So you got three recommendations when you ask for one.
Perfect. Giving people their money's worth. Well, Josh, thanks again for your time. And make sure to check out Josh's work on Twitter and On the Wrong Lead by Stable Duel. You can find links to those in the episode notes. Josh, I hope I can have you on again, perhaps leading up to the Breeders' Cup. And best of luck at the track this summer and fall.
Awesome. Thanks, Matthew.
A big thanks again to Josh for his time and knowledge. Make sure to tune back to Amalfi Sports for more horse racing handicapping, interviews with figures from across the world of sports, and so much more. Finally, if you want to keep up with daily news of horse racing, follow me at the Twitter handle @FailedToMenace or visit us at amalfimedia.com. Until next time, I'm Matthew DeSantis, and it's now post time.